following podcast contains language that may be inappropriate for younger listeners and covers topics that could be controversial or offensive to some. If you're the former, I'm sorry. If you're the latter, I'm sorry for you. Rated M for mature.
Hello, friend. Welcome, or welcome back. As always, know you're appreciated. So over the past week, there has been some conversations with my family about kind of how the podcast has progressed, and we're about 2 months into this. What was the feedback? What is it enjoyable? What are we seeing? How is it being received? What were some thoughts, some critiques, just general feedback and overall thoughts on it. And was at dinner with my son earlier in the week, and we've been discussing having him come on and be a guest on here and talking about things that we could talk about or what topics might be engaging for the two of us to interact with. And we had discussed talking about relationships and his view on partner versus a general conception view of partner. But one of the comments that he had made to me was that the tone was taking on very much a self-help kind of tone to the podcast, and discussing that, and made that comment to my wife that Aubrey had called out. It was starting to feel a little self-helpy, and she agreed and said very much so that it was taking on that kind of tone, and maybe that's where this evolves to over time, or there is a kind of subset underlying theme of personal development, professional development, as clearly those are topics I'm comfortable talking about. But one of the things my wife had said was that maybe I should consider sharing more about me and being more open in this, as most people don't, even people who know me, don't really know a lot about me. I'm very, very private, very guarded. My wife will refer to me as, quote, Big Bad Dave. And there is kind of this, I guess, impression of me that is not approachable or easy, kind of hard-lined. I don't know. And yeah, I am a private person, right? I don't share a lot about what goes on in my life. That it's just not who I am. It's not what I do. But I think maybe as I was thinking through what this episode was going to be about, and the timing that it was going to fall at the time of release, were the day before Father's Day. So happy early Father's Day to any of the dads that are listening. And I want to talk about something and share some things that probably will fall into some self-helpy for some people, just because of the nature of the topic. And it's something that's going to be sharing personal things about me that maybe not everybody knows. But again, I think it's very apropos given the timing of the release of this being right around Father's Day. So here we go. Let's get into it. So my name is David Swinson. It has not always been that. I was born David Matthew Hughes. Um, and I have a father, and that man is not the person that I recognize as my dad. Uh, my name now, David Matthew Swinson. Uh, my dad is Aubrey Harry Swinson. And um, he's the only memory I have of a dad or a father figure. I do not know the man who contributed DNA to my conception. He and my mother were married at the time. but I have no memories of that person. I know things of him, uh, things that were shared with me. I have probably in the last decade, I would say, connected with some cousins from that side of the family, but genuinely, Joe Hughes, who was my biological father, is someone I do not know and I do not recognize as my father or my dad. Um, Father, in the case of this, is the person that helped create me through bodily fluids, as gross as that may be. Dad, Aubrey, is the man who raised me and loved me, and he left us a little over 3 years ago. So May 1st, 2021. So we are just past 3 years. Um, but he's the only dad I've ever known. I only have memories of him. He he has been there, was there for everything I could remember. Um, he and my mother were married 42 years. They would have got together somewhere before that. So right around the time that I was 6ish, 7ish, somewhere in that range, 7 I believe is when he would have entered into my life, the or our lives as it were. Um and he created or completed is a better word, completed our family. Um, I can honestly tell you that at no point in time did I ever feel like I was not his son. Uh, I have a sister and a brother, and I want to make sure that you hear what I just said. I have a sister and a brother that are younger than me. There was no distinction between his biological children and me. We did not do halves in my house growing up. I don't have a half sister or a half brother. I have a sister and a brother. Um, and that is something that I carried forward in my life because of him and the way that our household ran as a child. The fact that there was no you didn't distinguish. There weren't his kids and then me. We were all his kids. And my oldest daughter is from my first marriage, and so by all technical terms, she has two half sisters and a half brother, but we don't do halves in my house either. And if you talk to my children, they are sisters and brothers, right? We and I learned that and from Aubrey. It's how our household ran when I was growing up. It's how he treated me and how he chose to love me, and it is what carried forth into my household as an adult, as a parent with my children. And I was very lucky to have a wife who embraced that concept and treated my oldest as our oldest. um and I think it's very important that I had that role model, um to set that tone. And I was very lucky to have that, because I know not everybody in a situation like I was in has that. There are people that experience the polar opposite of that. That there are divisions between the family, based on who the biological parent was. Um, so I can tell you that this man who had no obligation to be the person to set the tone, set a tone that helped mold and shape me as a parent, and showed me what I wanted to be as a dad. probably good and bad, right? That I would tell you that I probably picked up some of the things that were a little more gruff. I think part of me not being open and sharing a lot personally, um, my youngest will joke that, uh, why don't I love on her? Because she'll come in for a hug and I'll be like, but my dad really wasn't a hugger. I guess a lot of who I am as a man is modeled after who he was as a man, and that would be the good and the bad, right? And um, bad being a very subjective term here, because I don't know that looking back on this that I can tell you there was a whole lot of bad in that man. My mom may have a different impression of that, but that's a different relationship, right? They were married for 42 years, and I'm sure that she saw a different side than what me or my siblings would have seen. But as a dad, yes, he was stern, and when the need arise to punish or take corrective action, he would. But genuinely, he I knew he loved me, and I think my sister and my brother would say the same thing, that there was no question that he loved us. He showed us love in his way. Um, but uh, again, no question that I grew up in a household full of love, and in no small part due to him. So, who was Aubrey Swinson as a man generally? So, he was born July 1st, 1944. So, birthday just passed. He would have been 80 years old. He was born in Norfolk, Virginia. Uh, so, local kid to where I am. He graduated from Maury High School in 1964. So 10 years before I was born, he was graduating from high school. He was a structural engineer, and for the entirety of my memory, he worked for a company called Stroud Pinson Associates. Um, and he actually retired from there. So he spent 30 years working for them. If you are local to the Hampton Roads area, he was involved in projects you may be familiar with. He worked on Harbor Park. He worked on Scope, MacArthur Mall, the Waterside Building. Toward the end of his career, he did a lot with the public school system, working on those projects. The last one that he actually worked on was Great Neck Middle School. Um, so you know, I knew what he did. Um, didn't necessarily understand what a structural engineer was, but I knew he had worked on things that I could point at, and I thought that was kind of cool. I can remember telling people, um, when Waterside was coming to fruition, that my dad was involved in that, and I was really proud to be able to say that he worked on that project. Right, he was a part of that. I still tell people to this day that he was involved in Harbor Park. Uh, so he had a job that I understood, not necessarily what the technical function of the job was, but it had a tangible product that I could point to. And it was a sense of pride for me to be able to talk about something that other people would recognize as him being a part of the creation of, which I thought was kind of neat growing up. Um, so he was a collector of things. When I was a kid growing up, it was very much Redskin stuff. I guess scratch that Washington football team stuff. Nope, scratch that Commanders stuff. To hell with it. They're the Redskins. He collected Redskin stuff. Um, Later in his life, his collecting habits expanded out world to war memorabilia, military memorabilia, which he had some of when I was a kid, but apparently really grew into a big big thing later in his life. But he was a collector who collected for him. He didn't collect to show off a collection. He collected for his own enjoyment. The Redskin stuff that he had that I now have lived in his closet, and I can remember if you got to see it, he liked you because it was his stuff. He didn't. It wasn't out on display. It was in his closet. He could walk in and see it. It was on display for him. It wasn't on display for everybody. So if you had the opportunity to get invited in to see his Redskin stuff, you were in, right? He liked you if you got to see it. He took you into his little private area and would show it to you. Um, I do believe that he outgrew the closet as space opened up in the house as myself and my siblings grew up and moved out, and a closet became rooms that used to be bedrooms for his children became kind of showcase rooms, but again, very much for him. He collected for him, not for others. um on the Redskin front, right? If you think about my age and when I was growing up, so I was born in 1974, would have been at the height of my I'm a kid out playing with my friends um in the 80s. And during that time, any kid playing football in the neighborhood, if you were the quarterback, you wanted to be Joe Montana or Dan Marino during that point in time. And I very much was a Montana fan. Joe Montana, the 49ers, we were in their heyday. And somehow, somewhere, this man brainwashed me to be a Redskin fan. Um, I don't know how it happened, but my football team is the Washington Redskins, and it's because it was his football team. Um, in a in an era of greatness from Montana, you know, and Marino, the 49ers going to the Super Bowl, playing against the Dolphins, I am now outside wanting to be Joe Theismann, a guy most famous for getting his leg broke on national television. I'm not sure how he convinced me that being a Redskin fan made sense, but he did it, and it's I wanted to like the team that my dad liked. And to this day, I am a Washington fan if you ask me who my team is. Now, I did take a stand and I quit watching football because Daniel Snyder was a horrible owner and destroyed a very storied franchise. And at this point, have pretty much quit watching the NFL, but still, Redskin fan. Now, I mentioned his Redskin collection and me now having it. And when my mother and my sister got it all put together so that I could pick it up and I came home, I spent a good couple hours going through it and looking and um, just reminiscing over things that I remember seeing as a kid, things he had added since that I hadn't seen. And he had a pretty substantial number of jerseys, uh, whether that be John Riggins, which he was a huge John Riggins fan. Uh, and that was the one thing of all the things that if you would have told me you could only have one thing that was your dad's, what would you want? It would have been the John Riggins jersey, just because of how much he appreciated and was a fan of the Diesel John Riggins. Um, but going through these jerseys, and there's Riggins jerseys, and he had Sean Taylor jerseys, and of course Theismann jerseys, and any number of these things. And there's Pro Bowl jerseys from Redskin players. And as I'm going through, I'm pulling out, and if you know the Redskins, it's burgundy and white, and there's white jerseys with the burgundy letters, and there's burgundy with the white and the yellow, and then there's the Pro Bowl jerseys, and there is a jersey that is not like the others at all. Um, and I don't know what it is. I don't even recognize what team it might be. And I pull it out, and it's a Joe Montana jersey. I have no idea why he would have had, in and amongst all of this Redskin paraphernalia, a Joe Montana jersey. In my head, I went, oh, look at that. One final dig at me with a Montana jersey in here. Like, okay, the kid liked it. I'll get that, and one day he'll have it. Now, I don't know if that was legitimately his thought process or it just made sense given the success of Joe Montana to have a Montana jersey, but I'll tell myself whatever story suits my purpose in this. And I'm going to view it as, okay, I'll add one thing into this collection that will tie back to something that he liked as a kid. Aubrey was very much a car guy. Um, his dad owned Gold Star Auto in downtown Norfolk when he was growing up, so a garage. And my grandfather actually worked on one of the original British Minis. Beautiful car, white with blue stripe. I believe he also helped work on one of the original three-wheel cars in the U.S. But growing up in and near a garage, my dad was very much a car guy. His first car, as he told the story, was a 1957 Chevy that he actually built himself in the garage. Uh, I remember that he had a Z28 when I was little. Uh, I believe it was blue. I might be wrong on that, but I think it was blue. And it's a two-door sports car. It's 2+2. Think about my age, really not hanging out in car seats, worrying about seatbelts too much. But I have a very vivid memory of going to get a Christmas tree one year, and we went to Pembroke Mall again for the Hampton Roads natives. You know where that is, but it's snowing. It's very much movie fodder of here it is, a snowstorm. It's a mom, a dad, the son, and they're out looking for a Christmas tree, and we're on the Christmas tree lot. And again, we're at Pembroke Mall, and this tree gets tied to the top of the Z28. And so it is legitimately in the back glass of the car. And we are getting in the car to now go home, and my job, as assigned to me by my dad, is to watch the tree. Again, give the kid something to do so he's not being annoying on the ride home. My job, watch the tree. So I vividly recall standing in the back seat, staring out the glass at this tree that is just laid on the back of this Z28. And at this point in time, we lived at Independence Square Townhomes. I'm fairly certain that's where we were living at that point. So realistically, we just had to go a mile, head up Virginia Beach Boulevard, hang the left on Independence, and a right into the townhouses. So it really shouldn't have been that long of a drive. And in my head, the way this plays out is I'm standing there, I'm watching the tree, I turn around to say something to my parents, either unsolicited contribution to a conversation they're having or in response to a question that was being asked. I turn back around, tree is gone. I had one job, watch the tree, turn around for a minute, turn back, tree's gone. I have failed miserably. But I remember saying, we lost the tree. And we turned around and drove up and down Virginia Beach Boulevard looking for this tree that we could not find as we drug it down the street behind the car. Um, which, telling the story out loud now, probably not as funny as I remember it, but it is one of the funniest damn memories that I have of we're going to drive around and look for a tree that I say is gone, we've lost, but realistically, we're just pulling it around behind the car in the snow up and down Virginia Beach Boulevard. But back to him being a car guy thing. So again, he had the Z28. I have memories of him having friends come by and seeing cars like uh, Chevelle SS's or Novas. He had friends that had sports cars or muscle cars. He had those cars, and then family kicks in, and he stops having those cars, and we had a van at one point that was burgundy and white, looked like a candy cane. God, it was horrible. A Dodge van. Uh, but we had a station wagon, beige station wagon. He had a brown Monza. I don't know if anybody here is old enough to remember the Monza, but when think Pontiac Fiero, less cool. I think it was an attempt to for him to have a car but still fit into the family requirements, and it was brown and had horrible tan interior. God, it was not a cool car for a guy that liked cars. He really didn't get a chance to have the cool cars as a dad. Um and at one point they did buy a Mustang, and I can remember riding with him in this Mustang, and it in my head at this point he had moved past the cool car phase. He was very much just uh, he was the old guy that, here, I have this car that'll go really fast, but I go 40 everywhere I go now. Um, so by the time he got back to having kind of the cool car, he was really past cool car prime. I say that as a 50-year-old man that still thinks he's in his cool car prime and likes cars, but uh, I digress a little. But he was very much a car guy. He got into NASCAR, and my interest in NASCAR followed again his interest in NASCAR. But being into cars and watching cars go fast, he had an appreciation for racing. At some point in the course of my life, and it wasn't from the very beginning, but at some point we became a church going family. Not to say that we weren't religious prior to that, but we did become very engaged in the church at a certain point. And Aubrey was a Gideon, so the people that leave the little Bibles in the hotel drawers. He taught a Sunday school class. We went Sunday morning to Sunday school, stayed for Sunday morning service, went back Sunday night, went on Wednesdays. So I could tell you the better part of my childhood. We grew up in the church, and I think that in that involvement helped mold my current views toward religion, whether it ended up the way that he would have hoped. I don't know, but through the experiences of what happened during that period of time, and us leaving one church, going to another church based on kind of the quote unquote politics of what was happening in and around um, what I would describe as his Sunday school class becoming very popular, and that not being liked by the overall pastor, and therefore, just the treatment within the church that led us to going to another church. Um, but I can tell you the moment in time that my current viewpoints of religion were formulated, and it involves he and I at a concert at Rock Church in Virginia Beach. Um, I don't remember what the concert was at all. It was not. I'm sure it was something we wanted to go see when we went to go see it, but it that's not the memorable part of this. To me, it's we are in this church in the sanctuary, and the pastor is speaking prior to the concert beginning to start. And I guess for clarity's sake, I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, uh, maybe Independent Baptist, probably a blend between the two. And just side note, we're gonna discuss religion in future episodes, but this will kind of give you some visibility into who I am and my thoughts. But so Rock Church is not the church we attended. It happens to be the church we were going to this concert at. And they passed the offering plate for the tithe, which anybody who's gone to any church, that's going to happen. The ushers, the deacons, whoever are going to come and stand on either end of the row. And this plate is going to go up and down the row, and people are going to give money to help the mission of the church, right? They're going to make their tithe, their offering to God, uh, and to the church by proxy. And used to that, very, very used to that, having been involved in the church for as long as we had been. And so the tithe happens, the pastor continues to speak, and then the next thing that occurs is they hold up an envelope and say, I have in my hand the electric bill for the church. Who will take this burden for the church? And lo and behold, people in the congregation or the audience for this concert that had just put money in an offering plate are now volunteering to take on this bill for the church. And they ran through every bill for the church, and somebody took that burden on. Now, I'm a teenager at this point in time and arguably still very dumb, but even in that still formulating or growth phase of my brain, I ask myself the question, isn't that what the offering is for? You just passed the plate for us to give money, and now you're holding up bills. This is a scam. I don't believe that is the message that my dad would have wanted me to take away from that event, but it was the catalyst that led me to a point of believing religion is of man for man and a scam. And we'll get into that in future episodes, but this was not a case of how we lived our lives that created my viewpoint on religion, but experiences had living a religious life that was very much church centric, I would say, right? And oh my God, this is not, I am not a pastor's kid, right? This is not the evil footloose character that we're going to run this house by these rules, but there was very much a foundation of Christianity that guided our household. Um, I did not deploy that in my household as a parent, um, but it was there, right? The moral compass of God kind of guided our house. Um, but I told you that more to tell you about him. Again, this is a guy that he worked a full-time job. He prepared for teaching a Sunday school class. He was involved in the Gideons. Um, this was a good man. He, by all accounts, by any textbook definition, if you were to look at it from the outside and kind of make an evaluation of who Aubrey Harry Swinson was, good man, right? Um, and I don't think that can be said enough about him. And I guess more specifically, I don't know that I told him enough. Uh, so over the last 12 years or so of his life, my relationship with my family was not all that solid because of things, right? And we're not going to go into those things here because it was things on both sides that led to that. Um, but there really wasn't a high level of engagement um, between me and my parents or me and my siblings. And I will tell you that I remember my sister reaching out and telling me that dad was sick and real sick, and he had been sick for a while, um and he was not the healthiest of guys, right? He had kidney problems when I was growing up, when I was in boot camp in at Paris Island. He actually had a kidney transplant. um but he navigated through all of that, and he went on to continue to live a very healthy life, but he ended up with cancer, and he had been sick for a while, and I was unaware of the fact that he had been sick for a while, and that's on me, right? That's not on anybody else. I did not know because I was not engaged. But uh, again, that digresses slightly from what I'm talking about, but my sister reaches out and says that my dad is sick, and she's reaching out because he is now really sick, and it doesn't look good. And so I leave work and I go to the hospital, and here is in a hospital bed a frail man that I hope, I truly do hope, knew it was me standing in the room. Um, but he was no longer physically the man that when I picture my dad, I see in my head. Um, he so I jokingly tell people all the time there were two people on the planet that I was scared of. Um, my dad and my wife. Uh, my wife, because I truly believe that she would kill me in my sleep. She has that capacity. Um, if I ever did anything to hurt her or anything horribly wrong, she can genuinely be a very scary person. My dad, because he legitimately was the strongest person that I knew, both mentally and physically. Um, he would tell me a lot growing up that, hey, I'll hit you three times behind your left ear before you even know what happened, and we'll tell another story that ties to that, and then come back to what I was talking about uh, regarding the end. But um, 17, maybe 16, 17, somewhere in that range, we had that father son moment that I think a lot of people have experienced. Um, Luckily, I did not experience it with my own son, at least as of yet, although it may happen, who knows. But I actually had him prove the "I will hit you three times behind your left ear before you know what happened" statement. Um, I recall being in the living room slash dining room section of my parents' house, and I do not remember what I was, I guess, for lack of a better term, in trouble for. But he's yelling at me um, about whatever I'm, whatever dumb thing I've done, And I remember him walking toward me, and he would have told you that I bumped him. I would tell you I quit backing up and he walked into me. But all I remember is my chest making contact with his chest and then me looking at the ceiling. Um, when I tell you that one, it's a respect factor for my dad that he was and forever will be the authoritative figure in my life. That he could look at you and you knew he was serious, right? I don't think I'm unique in telling a story about my dad having this look that you knew, okay, playtime was over, this is serious. I think lots of people would be able to tell those kinds of stories, but I'm not a small man by any means, right? I'm 6'3" and shrinking as I get older. I'm 230-ish pounds. um I wasn't the biggest kid. I was tall, 6'3", buck 65, buck 70, in pretty decent shape. I ended up going into the Marines, right, and survived what is arguably the most difficult boot camp. And in my impression, did it with relative ease because I was in pretty good physical shape. But I would tell you, even coming out of the Marines, and I left the Marines 6'3", 190 of pure muscle, I still wouldn't have challenged my dad. That he, again, was and will forever be the person that could whoop my ass. And I don't question that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I believe if he wanted to, he'd put me on my back again. Um, so to now tie back into what we were talking about, to see this man who in my head was the guy that at one point in time actually threw me up a set of stairs for something I had done by kind of my back just up the stairs threw me. And I remember being on the ground floor and landing upstairs in my room without touching any of the steps, to now this frail man laying in a hospital bed that, again, I'm not sure he knew it was me because of how the cancer had ravaged him. And thinking to myself that I missed the opportunities to make sure that he knew how much he meant to me in my life. That, he didn't have to be my dad. He chose to be my dad. He didn't have to treat me just like he did his kids. He chose to treat me like he did his kids. And the weight of that decision, that choice he made, is not lost on me. It's a difficult proposition to be a parent to your own children, right? I know this by having four kids. There is a lot of responsibility that goes along with being a parent. And that is a huge, and I'm going to use this word and I don't want it to be taken wrong, but it's a huge burden. There's immense joy that goes and is derived from it. But I don't want you to take lightly the responsibility associated with being a parent. The care, the protection, the molding and shaping of a young person that relies on you as their sole provider or support system, and for him to choose that role for someone that he didn't have to is huge. And as a shout out to my wife, for for me to be lucky enough to have picked a partner who was willing to make that same choice and be that for my oldest child is not lost on me, and I appreciate her and love her for that. And I have a very, very deep rooted understanding and appreciation for it because of my own experience with my dad. Uh, but people talk about what do you regret and would you change anything? And I will tell you that hindsight being 2020, I regret the fact that I was not there to be a support or a help when he needed it, especially given the fact that he chose to be a support and a help for me when he didn't have to. Um, I don't know, right? Changing it, if you change something, it changes a lot of things, and I don't think I'm sitting where I am without the choices that I made, but I do regret that choice. The not not knowing for certain that he knew I loved him and that I appreciated him because I hadn't been around to tell him or show him that's something I have to live with. And I hope that he knew. I there's no way for me to know, right? I can be reassured by my siblings or my mother or people around me, but again, I can't hear it from him, so I don't know for certain. Again, I hope that he knew. I hope he knew how much he meant to me, um, how important he was in my life. But again, that's all it is a hope. Um, but at least now everybody else will know that I loved him and how much he meant to me and how much he was appreciated. And you know, I guess in a strange way, his last act on this planet is is basically the same act that he performed early in my life, which was he completed my family. I have since re-engaged with my mother, my sister, my brother, my niece and nephew, my sister's children. Um, so whereas he provided me a family when he came into my life, he re-provided that family when he left my life. And I guess that's poetic. It's full circle. There's a lot more I could say about him and could tell, but one, I'm not. I guess you could hear it through this. This is not stuff I'm comfortable talking about, and it's more the sharing component. I guess I'm not comfortable, and um, I don't know if it's me thinking that this shows weakness or vulnerability or something. Whatever the case is, it was important for me on Father's Day weekend specifically to kind of do this. And it just made sense given the conversations that it had previously that maybe share a little more about me, but really I wanted to share about him. And happy Father's Day, Dad. Just know I loved you. So that's really all I've got this episode, guys. So until next time, remember, affect change. Don't let change affect you. I'm out.